Hello, everyone. Welcome to Light Haven, the podcast for all things spiritual, mystical, and energetic. My name is Ruth, mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness.
And my name is Bianca, lightworker and astrology enthusiast.
Today's episode is called A Non-Linear Journey, the beautiful cycle of death, rebirth, and transformation. It's a really fitting topic following on from our previous discussion. Previously, we were talking about going within and discovering a whole world. There's a lot you can find when you start looking at your internal dynamics. And oftentimes, we go through difficulties in the heat of the moment. We can feel so much emotion, so much stress, and the pressures that weigh on us just from the either the day-to-day events of life or some of those larger milestones that can even be very jarring for us. All of these things work together to shape our character if we will allow it. There's a certain way of looking at life where we could consider that each person is somewhat of a diamond being formed under pressure. All of the difficulties, the events, the heartbreaks, the disappointments, if we will allow them, press on us, and through our reflection can lead us to transformation. Kind of the concept of the self-made man. We can become something more if we can see the wisdom in the events that transpire in our lives looking back. But before we get too deep into this topic, I want to know, Bianca, what's up on the
Hi.
astrology scene?
Yeah. So we have there's a lot going on always. It's quite busy in the sky, and I know time is very limited. So I was like, what transits do I choose to talk about that I feel like would be relevant or the most relevant um today in what's going on in our world in this moment. So I know that there are some, I guess in the astrology world where there are major transits that almost every astrologer talks about, and you're going to hear them over and over again. But I chose to go with probably a less talked about transit, which is the mutual reception between Jupiter in Gemini and Mercury in Sagittarius. So that we had Mercury enter Sagittarius on November the 3rd here in New Zealand. And it's going to be applying to a perfect opposition to Jupiter in Gemini um, up until the 17th of November. So a couple of weeks, but then Mercury turns retrograde and starts moving to the naked eye backwards in the sky. And through that retrograde process, it then hits a another it applies to a perfection again opposite perfection with Jupiter. So Mercury goes stations retrograde on the 25th of November. And then it starts moving back towards in opposition to Jupiter around December the 4th. So that I've covered almost nearly a full month of these movements. And for those of you guys who don't know, mutual reception is a form of is what we describe when a planet is in when we've got two planets in different signs. But so the signs have planetary rulers. Okay. And the planetary ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter. And the planetary ruler of Gemini is Mercury. And so what we've got is we've got a switch in, instead of Gemini being in Mercury being in Gemini, we have Mercury now in Sagittarius, where Jupiter resides, and then Jupiter is in Gemini. So it's almost like you and I, like if we decided that for a weekend I'm gonna hang out at your place and you're gonna come hang out at my place, and we're just hanging out in each other's houses. um, what's that is a form of support, and so it can be seen as these two planets helping each other out. So it's a good thing, but it's a hard aspect. It's the opposition aspect. So opposition is it's where you've got these two planets looking at each other, and there's tension, and it's like two sides of the same coin. And so what we find here is we find the significations of Jupiter, and we find the significations of Mercury, and we see them on polar opposites with each other, and there's that creates tension. So what I think we're going to experience a lot from what we've already been experiencing from the 3rd of November, which was a week or so ago, right through to the end of the year, is I think we are going to find ourselves in situations that can be quite polarizing. We might find ourselves on one side of a spectrum, and we might encounter the extreme opposite. And it's like, what are we going to do? How are we going to face this? How do we approach this opposition, right? And so now I I I was listening to my one of my favorite astrologers, Adam Adam Allenbass from Nightlight Astrology. He actually, one of his episodes, he talked about this transit, and I felt like it was really fitting to the current climate situation, given the elections that had just gone in the States, in the US. And I was like, wow. And I couldn't, I was like, I have to talk about this and share a little bit on what he talked about. So, first of all, it's helpful to understand if you don't know, if it's helpful to understand what these symbols, the planets, Mercury and Jupiter, represent, because when you can understand what they symbolize, then you can understand the type of conflict or tension that you could uh, that you would expect to encounter. So Mercury is associated with deconstructing of the rational mind. Mercury's very changeable. It's very curious, likes to pull things apart and then put them back together again. It's very analytical. Also in ancient astrology, Mercury was, no, actually, in ancient astrology, the entire science of astrology was attributed to Hermes, which is the Roman name for the Greek god, which Mercury is believed to have symbolized and embody the characteristic traits of. So Adam describes the science of the stars as hermetic insofar as it is an interconnected mandala. So, like, it's almost like any piece that you try to put together cannot be understood without putting another part of the piece of the puzzle together. So, in a way, you have to deconstruct and like and Adam says reverse engineer different facets of the language to understand other facets of the language. And a real basic example is that when when I was learning astrology, I still am. I will always be a student of learning. But when I first started out, I I learned that the planets were like symbols in a birth chart. And when I understood that concept, I then had to learn, well, what do these symbols mean? And so Hellenistic astrology is based in the Greco-Roman era, 550 BC to 1000 AD. The planets, according to Hellenistic astrology, were based on the Greek gods of that time, and that region. So I knew nothing about Greek gods. So therefore, I had to study and learn, like, who was Aphrodite, who was Zeus, Hermes, Kronos, how were they related? What was their relationship with one another? And by understanding that, I can then now apply that knowledge to the symbolism in the birth chart that I'm looking at. So that's kind of like a basic, like you have to understand one area before yeah, just anyway, the mandala, um, an interconnected mandala of pieces of the puzzle that you're just putting together.
Yeah, the
Um,
universe is a complicated place. So I reckon it takes a
very,
lifetime to
very,
uncover just a little bit of wisdom.
exactly. And so, um, astrologer, um, like I feel like as an astrologer, not just me, but just like in general, is Hermes like in a way, because we should always remain curious and we should always feel like we haven't arrived at like a complete understanding of anything. Um, just to remain open, and it's like an ongoing communication, an ongoing interpretation. And as we see, the astrology's gone through many different eras and different gone through different time periods, and things have shifted and changed according to, and it's reflective of that time period. So learning about ancient astrology and learning about the ways in which the ancient astrologers thought is somewhat different to how we would think of things and topics relevant to our times in today's world. Um, okay, so that is Mercury. Now, Gemini, oh, not Gemini, Jupiter. We got Jupiter is um I have mixed feelings about Jupiter, but so Jupiter's a god that is associated with philosophers, sages, knowledge, wisdom. Jupiter represents can represent a philosophical system that is whole and complete unto itself. For
Jupiter
example,
sounds good then.
it sounds good, but yeah,
Yeah.
I gotta put my feelings aside here. There's other things that Jupiter represents. But I'm just kind of relate this part to, because it's all kind of connected in my explanation here. So the and these things, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, they have universal they represent universal archetypes, but they're very multivalent. Like it's like a broad umbrella. And so some of these things that I'm picking out is like things that I'm choosing specifically to mention. So this isn't like a all-encompassing explanation of Mercury or of Jupiter. So things that I'm kind of talking about is more just kind of relevant to what I want to share and what we're going to talk about today. So yeah, so like I said, Jupiter is this associated with or represents systems that are whole and complete. For example, doctrines of a church, like a systemic unity. Like it could also be like the values that create a system, a legal system, or a church organized religion. And Jupiter also represents like forms of knowledge that has been institutionalized or has been passed down through oral traditions. So you can see Jupiter just really kind of it can be universities, schools of thought, but it is an institutionalized, organized, cohesive structure that you go to for learning. But it can also mean, like many of these cultures that didn't have a written language, like such as the Maori culture. We don't have a written language in terms of, it was all oral. It was like the knowledge that we had, the way we spoke, it was just all spoken. It was never written down, because we didn't have pen and paper to write things. Like, you know what I mean? Very yeah, very I want to say indigenous, but I don't think that's the right word. But
It was alive. It was
yeah.
all communicated through human connection. You didn't
Mhm.
have just a piece of paper to learn. You always learn from another person.
Mhm. Mhm. So yes, and so Jupiter is like cohesion and unity. And it's Jupiter is like is the formalized, it's like it can be formalized, but formalized in terms of how you want to define formalized. Because like I said, in the Maori culture, what is formal? It's, you learn, you get wisdom passed down to you from your elders, and then you teach it on to your children. And that is a formal way of passing knowledge down through the generations. And to another society, like in the Hellenistic period, that would have looked like they would have been writing on scrolls or something like that. So yeah. Um, so that is Jupiter. Now, when we put Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, a Mercury ruled sign, and we put Mercury in Sagittarius, a Jupiter ruled sign, we get two sides of the same coin. So Mercury finds truth, like I said, through deconstructing, analyzing all different possible sides. And through that, we find greater meaning. And this is an example that I could share, is that there could be something that I would have I had a difficult experience with someone, and it left me feeling like, oh, I don't like that person. Like maybe it was confronting, or maybe they're very abrupt, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. And I come to a conclusion with certainty. There's a judgment that I place on that person, and I think, oh, they are not a nice person. Okay, it's very human. We all do it. And so what will happen then is a transit will come along, and it will allow me, a transit, say like Jupiter in Gemini and Mercury in Sagittarius. And then I won't know this. It's not because I see the stars being this way, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to open up my mind to rethink, my judgment. It's not like that. It's just kind of what's internal reflects externally. So what's out in the cosmos is also reflective of your inner workings, and the things that are being activated within your psyche, within yourself. And I say things, yeah, open to interpretation. So what I mean is, like, so transit comes along, suddenly I start rethinking the experience that I had with this person, and I start thinking, well, maybe there's something else to it, or maybe this person was going through this. And then I suddenly start thinking of the situation in different ways. And and this is and then it's like, okay, actually my perception is now starting to change, because I'm open to realizing that maybe there was something else to this that at that time I couldn't see, but now I do see. And it's kind of like that hermetic. I've kind of like deconstructed. I've like looked at all the different like angles that I could have looked at that experience, that situation, and then I find additional reasoning, and now I'm kind of like, what the certainty I felt a couple of days ago about this person is now, my perspective's changed, because I've thought about it, and some other truths have been made realized to me through me pondering and meditating, or just thinking about reliving that situation over and over again in your head. And then you're like,
So is it that through analyzing or meditating or whatever you want to
mm-hmm,
call it, you gain a fresh view on the other person and you
yeah,
extract the wisdom from that experience?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yes. And that can be very liberating to someone who may be stuck in their own trauma responses. Because in the moment, you're triggered and you have these reactions, these mechanical reactions. And it's not till afterwards, and it's the analyzing and the reflecting that you think, you know what, actually, she probably had a bad day. That's why she was like yelling at me. It wasn't anything to do with me. And that analyzing and that newfound perspective can be very liberating for someone who was once bound by their certainty and their own judgments. Now they've taken a step back and been like, actually, you know what? It wasn't that bad. They're not a bad person, you know. So yeah, so that is what we could expect to find with this transit. Is there's a lot of like deconstructing, analyzing, considering other points of views, things like that. Um, just like just like I thought I was gonna say something about Jupiter. Um, yeah, Jupiter, I would say in a Hermes ruled or Mercury ruled sign of Gemini is in the process of building through taking things apart. And I'm not even sure if that can even be conceptualized in any given way, but
I
it,
understand that.
you get it?
Building through taking things apart. Well, if you think
Yeah.
of like my son and Legos, right? If he
Hmm.
wants to build something and he's got this box full of Legos and there's all these different broken, useless old structures, then when you want to build something new, you've got to dismantle all the old
Hmm.
unhelpful structures and then assemble all the pieces that you want to use to create something new. And then you put the new thing together, and now you've got the structure that you want.
That's it. That's it. Yes. So it's building it. Yeah. So one word, Jupiter is constructive, Mercury deconstructive. So, but because they're in each other's signs, there's this. It's quite useful. They're both working together to arrive to some kind of different perspective, but they arrive at it through different means. One was has is building up through analyzing, deconstructing, and one is yeah, deconstructing and then that they arrive to like a greater knowledge and understanding, right? So that's also being built up, your knowledge and your wisdom.
If I can just say one thing
Mhm.
about that, just in case this goes over someone's head.
Yeah.
So, because I get exactly what you're saying, but let's say someone hasn't been studying psychology
Mhm.
or astrology, they might
Mhm.
not quite grasp what we mean.
Mhm.
So, the this whole episode is about the cycle of kind of birth, death, and transformation, which is you
Mhm.
have one way of being and you have your vision on the new way of being that you want to get to, you can see a superior reality for
Mhm.
yourself. And you know that's what you deserve. That has all the abundance, all the
Mhm.
love, all the joy. It has your tribe around you. It has that faith in life and your destiny. And meanwhile, you are stuck under a cloak of darkness, shame,
Mhm.
guilt, low self worth, uh, low self esteem. And this cloak is blocking you and protecting you or stopping you from getting to that beautiful future that you can see in your vision. So, in order for you to get there, the thing that you are now has to die.
Mhm.
And that's the deconstruction.
Mhm.
All of the things that you are grasping to, clinging to, that you think make you feel safe and you feel comfortable in, they don't serve you and they need to be completely dissolved and let
Mhm.
go of,
Mhm.
including that identity with victimhood and all those things holding you back. Then you can create your new reality. So the
Mhm.
deconstruction and reconstruction work hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that
Absolutely.
makes sense.
Absolutely. No, you described that perfectly. And thank you for putting that into perspective. I there's one other piece to that as well that I briefly mentioned earlier is, and it's very important, is the fact that the that Jupiter and Mercury are in each other's signs, but they are in opposition to each other. So it that indicates to me that this is not going to be an easy time. This is going to be one where we will be confronted with tension, the tension of opposites, and we'll need to learn how to hold the tension of, because when you're looking at two sides, they're two sides of the same coin, they're two sides of something that the two truths staring at each other, being like, who's more right? Well, it's not who's more right. It's like, how can I believe in one thing, but also understand that there's truth to the other side of it as well? And so maybe if you do find yourself going through struggles, that's like understanding that this is a thing, this is happening right now in the cosmos, that it is a very polarizing time, and it's got everything to do with the Mercury and Jupiter energy, like I just said, how they symbolize the whole construction, deconstructing, analytical mind versus like cohesion and systematic unity. You know, they both can coexist together, and so there was a couple of things that I took away from that talk of atoms that he did a few days ago, and he actually went through, I think, 10 different juxtapositions or 10 different tensions that he struggles with, that I picked a couple of them that I resonated with. So I'll give you an example. He said, he used a example of um like pain and transcendence. So seeing, it's like, if you are suffering, it doesn't feel good when someone says, but you're an eternal and mortal soul, like, I'm just like, that's not where my mind is at. I'm right here in the suffering right here. Like, don't talk to me about transcendence and all that BS, like, because I'm not there. And so it can be very dismissive to the human experience when someone comes and says to you, just rise above. I'm like, if I could, I would. But my time right now is here in the suffering. So let me suffer and just support me in this. um, but yeah, I think on the flip side though, and this is what I remind myself when I'm kind of at the end of self-pity, as I'm like what the silver lining in this is that the level of pain and suffering that we go through and that we overcome is equivalent to the level of transcendence that we will reach once we overcome, right? So yeah, if I'm thinking, man, this is a tough gig, I don't know if I can stick this out any longer, um then even I tell myself, like, okay, I'm gonna rise above eventually and I'm gonna be better for it. But just have a little bit of patience. But it's different when I tell myself that as opposed to someone else telling me that, right? Like, I'm like, no, I didn't I didn't ask for you to tell me what to do. I just need your support. Your unconditional and unwavering love and support, please.
Yeah, we can never give anyone any advice. If we've
Mhm.
learned one thing, no one
Yeah.
listens to
No,
advice.
exactly. Yeah. And it's, yeah, like, yeah, don't do it. Yeah. And then one other one, because I know we got to move on, is that he mentioned, I laugh because this is very funny. I've had this exact same conversation in the recent past is that there's this polarity of being like nothing is at stake and everything's at stake. And so, the person that's like, oh, nothing's at stake is, which I find myself, I have leaned towards, where it's like, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to go and get in the flow of things. I can't control anything anyway. It's all outside of my control. So I'm just going to trust the process, and no matter what it doesn't matter what I do. Like, you feel kind of like that disempowered. Oh, I give up. It doesn't matter what I do anyway, because it's still going to play out and it's still going to be a rough ride. So I've kind of felt that way. And then the other side of it is like you get the people that would be like, well, like if you, Bianca, have your head in the sand, like how's any change gonna happen? We need to band together. Like you're a part of this community in this world. Like, you're participating in it, even if you don't want to acknowledge that, so you need to so that's the other side of the spectrum, like the extreme side. Like, we need to band together and join forces, and it's like we're a collective, and it's only then will we make a difference.
A whole activist vibe, eh?
Yeah.
I think like just hearing you talk about those two sides and then reflecting on where do I stand, I would definitely be straight down the middle.
Yeah.
I'm not to the left or the right when it comes to these things, just right in the middle.
Wow, I've definitely had that conversation where it's like, Bianca, you got your head in the sand. You're a little naive. You don't even know what's going on, like in your community, kind of thing. And I'm just like, okay, these are very strong judgments that you're passing. And I would say, I'm not that naive, but yeah, I've definitely had that like being put on me, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel nice.
Well,
um,
if I think of activism, it brings me back to something Ram Dass said, and I'll have to paraphrase it.
mhm,
But essentially, if we go into activism with a heart full of anger, values beget values. So
mhm,
going in with anger and an energy of destruction and us against them leads to more disharmony, more chaos, and more separation.
yeah.
And you can only sit there with your picket if you have as much uh, love in your heart as the whole universe
Mhm,
for the person on the other side of the line. And if you can
yeah.
hold that much love and sit there with your stance, then you're allowed to sit there. But if you're sitting there with hate, you're just as much part
Mhm,
of the problem.
mhm. Exactly. No, I love that. Thank you. And so that is the astrology weather for you. Just some things to think about. Yep, some if you find yourself in a very, polarizing situation. I know I have, just scrolling through social media, seeing the divide, and I'm not even in the States, but I follow a lot of astrologers on Instagram, and I know that their heart is in the good place, and all they want to do is just like they might put a post up to just kind of share in their hurt and disappointment maybe of the results of the US elections, and then the amount of hate and backlash they get from their own followers. I'm just like, wow, like it just breaks my heart, So it can get a little bit, I can be a little bit, yeah, sensitive to the things that are going on, and I'm just like, I can feel the tension, I can feel the divide, and this way of thinking versus that way of thinking, and there's like no middle ground. It's either you're on our team or you're not, you're with us or you're not. And I'm just like, oh man, it's a bit overwhelming. So, and I was saying to someone the other day, I was like, I think I just need to take a break from social media because this is too much. Like, so yeah, if you find
Yeah.
yourself in those situations, yeah, it's in the stars.
Well, I agree with taking a break from social media because,
Mhm,
sometimes you just got to stay out of it. For me, like if I see those
mhm.
paths and those views, I just say, I take the path of love. I'm out. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not part of
yeah.
this war.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I know you had a couple things that you wanted to talk about. I'm excited to hear about this meditation thing that you were telling me earlier.
Yes. So I know we've harped on about meditation in a lot of our previous episodes, but we're not about to stop now. So
Yeah.
it's something that maybe if you've been listening to us from the beginning, you still haven't started doing it, and that's fine. You know, everyone is where they're at and can choose what practices are right for them. I have to say that meditation completely changed my life. And that's why I'm passionate about it. And that's why I can't shut up about it. And I've got to tell everyone about it. Um, it all started with the FitMind app. And people who have discussed this with me know that I will mention the FitMind app to anyone and everyone. It's completely secular. So if you are allergic to spirituality, then go try the FitMind app. And it will be a great segue into your new best life. So, um, Liam McClintock is the guy who created the app. And funny thing is that he eventually became a monk. He got ordained. I've talked about him before, but I still use the app, and I recently went back to the beginning to listen to one of the introductions in the app that was a hook for meditation. And when I listened to it, I thought, wow, I've got to tell everyone about this, about just how good meditation is. So I've referenced that this is from the app, but it doesn't make it any less good and useful. So the first thing is that there's a lot of science backing up the benefits of meditation. So, first of all, your brain is the most complicated artifact in the universe.
I believe that.
Uh, yeah, it's comprised of 80 to 100 billion cells, neurons, and each one has around 5,000 connections. So Liam says that mental fitness is the next major health revolution. And what we're seeing is that potentially mental exercise could be even more important than physical exercise. So he referenced this, it's a geneticist PhD who then later became a monk named Mathieu Ricard. And he's also known as the world's happiest man. So when they scanned his brain, they found after all of his meditation, he had an abnormally active prefrontal cortex and extremely high frequency gamma brainwave patterns. And this was all observed by scientists in his brain. So it's legitimate, it's not made up, and it is a result of his meditation. So when we learn to meditate, even if we start off with 2 minute segments, 3 minute segments, 5 minute segments, if we build this up over time, then our mind is trained to be able to focus intently for longer and longer periods. And when it is able to do this, it is considered that your mind is getting fitter. So, what does a fit
Okay.
mind do? Yeah, a fit mind. So, just like how we exercise a muscle, our mind can get more and more fit. And in spiritual communities, they call it becoming more conscious or raising your vibration. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter what you call it, something really good is happening. So when your mind becomes more fit, you then see situations clearly and objectively. And that allows you to react rationally rather than behaving mechanically or like an insane
I
person.
see.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you become more present rather than being lost in thought. And a person that's lost in thought, uh, in spiritual talk, we'd say their mental body is gone out of the physical body. It's like away with the fairies. But in everyday language, we just say, you're not even here. You're not present. You're missing the moment. A fit mind also recovers quickly from negative emotions. It's full of vitality and purpose. And the neuroscientists have found that meditation can change the structure of our brains and even alter our bodies. So, what ends up happening is that it enhances every area of cognition. It improves the health of the whole body. It improves your concentration, your mood. It reduces your stress and anxiety, and it supports your immune function, improves insulin sensitivity, increases your pain tolerance. And I think the ladies will like this. It helps to slow cellular aging.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very
So
nice.
FitMind is not paying me to say all this, but I'm just an avid supporter and believer in it. Please check it out.
Nice.
But yeah, let's get on with the topic. So we're
Yeah. Yeah.
were you
By
saying
the
something?
way, I did download Fitmind app. Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
yeah. So good. It's so good. Very, very helpful and I think it's not alleviated, but elevated my meditation practice. So it's really cool. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you've worked with it for a period of time, say a few years, then you can start exploring some deeper meditations
Hmm.
that, say, the advanced yogis and monks have used. Like those techniques, don't even think about them at first. Just do the basics, because even things like, sitting with your darkness and confronting your grief, if you
Hmm.
can't even sit, then start with the sitting, start with just learning to hold your awareness in one place, and everything else can come later.
Hmm.
But yes, highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to. I could talk about meditation all day.
I feel
But
like we mention
we're
it every episode.
yeah, yeah,
But
and
it's
I
worth it and
yes,
it's true.
I have no shame or
Mhm.
apologies for doing that.
Mhm.
Very happy to. So we're talking about the journey of a person through their difficulties
Mhm.
towards transformation. And I
Mhm.
love that you brought up those astrological elements on analyzing what's going on,
Mhm.
deconstructing, reconstructing. But let's give it a little bit of background, what we mean
Mhm.
by this whole process. So, first of all, with regards to some terminology, there's this lovely word that I've seen come up in some schools that I wanted to introduce, and I think we've mentioned it before. Some groups refer to the soul as the essence. So when you're studying all these ancient wisdoms and doctrines, it can be confusing because the semantics can shift from system to
Mhm.
system. But if you love a good puzzle, you'll learn to seamlessly jump in and out of the different systems, and then the whole world is opened up to you. So, what we call the soul has been beautifully described as the essence. And basically, what that indicates is the very essential part of who we are, the part of us that holds all of our virtuous qualities, our goodness, our pureness. And it's the idea that these qualities never left us. They are always there. We are born with them. And if we find ourselves in turmoil, in a funk, in difficulty, and with huge trauma and negative emotions, that is never the real you. The real you is hiding underneath all of that. And the reason you can't see it is because of the conditioning that has obscured the beautiful internal nature you have. And what's prescribed to people is that through ongoing self-observation, then our natural state can be recovered. And that's why all of the meditation schools, whether Hindu or Buddhist, they teach the same thing. They have different myths and different characters, gods and goddesses, all of those myths and characters that represent certain elements of our hero's journey, if you will. But the really practical aspect of it is how through observation we can get back to our natural state. And our natural state is full of love, beauty, and happiness. So then the question comes, where on earth did we go wrong? Right? How did we end up with all these obscurations, all this conditioning? And this is a complex problem. So I don't think that we can unpack all of it in this one episode, but there's a few different points I wanted to touch on. And the first one is herd mentality. So think of Black Friday.
Oh my gosh.
When people lose
Craziness.
Yeah, exactly. So or think of some kind of scene like a sudden act of violence or a car crash or a building fire. What do people do? They gather around and they stare.
They get their phones out and they
Yeah. Now they get their phones out. Like at a concert these days, no one even watches the concert. They might as well have stayed home. So herd mentality is where our consciousness has left the building. There's no awareness at all. And basically, by when we lose our sense of who we are and we just conform to everyone else due to pressures, due to fear, fear of standing out, fear of being different, fear of being authentic, or fear of judgment, which comes because we judge others, so we think they judge us, and it becomes this perpetuating cycle. It's a kind of hypnosis. So, when you have a good hypnotist that hypnotizes you to be more confident and more charismatic or whatever it is, most of the world has the other kind of hypnosis that's just happened by default because we weren't driving the bus. So the bus was just left on autopilot and now it's following some random roads and all the cars are going together in the same direction, but we don't know where that is. And another aspect to how we get conditioned is fascination. So I think when you are scrolling social media and you can't stop, that is a perfect example of fascination.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can look at one video, but what about if it's 5 hours? You are completely gone, right? And that does happen. It's happened to me in the past before I kind of took drastic steps to get myself free of it. It can happen to anyone. There's no shame in it. But I'm just using that as an example to refer to how conditioning takes place. When we don't stay conscious of what is going on internally, then everything in our environment does it for us. And especially when we are holding an energy of fear, like we are afraid to be different, because when we are authentic and when we choose love and humility, and the rest of the world is walking away of one-upmanship and pride and shame and guilt and all these things, it takes a kind of courage to be so grounded in yourself that you're not worried about standing out from the crowd. And the people that do demonstrate that courage become a beacon of light to give someone else the confidence to do the same. So I would describe it as having a rebellious character, a rebellious streak where you say, no, I'm not going to be basic. I'm not going to be like everyone else.
I'm going to go against the grain.
Yeah, exactly. Because if we think about society in 2024, even though we have a ton of virtue signaling, a ton of activism, if you were to have a magic telescope where you could look inside the hearts and minds of people out there, what would you see? Like, what is normal inside of people for their psyche, their emotional state? They're full of fear, greed, envy. I had a friend who her partner got a big promotion, and it was a small company, and quite a few people that knew them that they thought were their friends, they didn't come and congratulate him at all. They were so jealous. And
Mm.
that's when she realized that these people were not their friends because they couldn't be happy for his advancement in the company, which was basically them acknowledging all his years of hard work. It was justified. There was nothing unfair about it. But these people were just so full of envy that it destroyed their friendship. And so now we find out what is inside the heart of people, those people that smile and said good morning to you every day for years. When you look inside of them, then you see the truth. We also have huge objectification that is just so normal in this day and age, where we can't look at other humans from a place of love and soul connection and just seeing them as another human. uh, Ramdas says when you're on that channel, you see people as makeable or unmakeable,
Oh,
which is
makeable.
basically, yeah, his old fashioned speak, right? But um, he means objectification in 2024. That's what we would say, like
Mhm.
not not seeing anyone as a person anymore. You know, what's in it for me? What can this person do for me? Can they give me attention? Can they say all the things I want to hear? Can they come over? Uh, they're not a human anymore. And this is considered normal. And then, of course, there's a huge amount of abusive substances as well, drugs and alcohol. All of this is considered just the normal way of being. Everyone thinks that's fine. Now, it is fine. It has to be because it's happening. But for the individual who chooses to have that rebellious character, it doesn't have to be that way. So the method that we're talking about is quite radical because most people won't stop for a second to observe themselves and their inner state with a view to improve their character. Caveat to this is if you have perfectionist problems, maybe you need to be careful with this. But for everyone else, you're all
Yeah.
good. You're all good to start observing. I wanted to share a story about how these practices can be brought to life, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. So recently, in the past few weeks, there was a personal situation that was particularly challenging for me, and it led to some an arising of uncomfortable emotions. And I'm used to being quite zen, so it was a surprise. And in the moment, over that period of those few weeks, when the emotions presented on the screen of my awareness, you could say, it was difficult. It was very uncomfortable. And I was observing it, thinking, how unusual, how curious. But my tools were the same: observe, meditate to understand, and seek to transcend. And so I carried out with my daily practice, even though I was going through this period of inner disruption. And maybe there was a part of me that was resisting it because I wasn't used to it, and that prolonged the process. But I got through it. And as I continued just staying aware with those difficult emotions and only seeking further understanding and transcendence, then I started to extract a kind of wisdom about myself, about what was taking place internally, and very importantly, where it came from, how it got created within me in the first place. Because when you have an internal state that suddenly surprises you out of left field, it came from somewhere. Often it was created a long time ago. So when you're sitting in meditation and you suddenly receive this understanding, a lot of connections can be made. And once you are very clear in your understanding, the thing that was bothering you suddenly seems to disappear. It's like, oh no, I understand it. It's gone. And a few days later, after these weeks of difficulty, I felt this wave of relief, like I had finally transcended it, not by force, but just by careful, patient persistence. So I share this to encourage people that these methods we're talking about really work. Because, it's not to say that you should judge or resist your negative emotions. That will make it worse. But there's a higher way of life where you can find freedom and a new perspective that allows you to transcend what you experienced. And as you keep going with this daily practice, then your perspective becomes broader and broader. And you know how you were talking about polarization. So as your view and understanding expands, then when you have someone who is looking at the scene from the other side of the table, your awareness is able to go and join them on that side, see it from that angle, and then come back and go, well, I am going to keep standing here, but I can totally appreciate where you're standing, where you're coming from.
Yep. Yep. It's that's a very different thing to being like, there's only one truth, and that's my truth. And so therefore everyone else is wrong for not feeling or seeing the world like I see it. And that's the thing, is like, we've got two sides of the same coin. You just shared how, there's that ability to be able to see someone else's perspective, and also hold the truth that to be inside of you, So, yeah, it's, I almost wonder if we are somewhat spelling out emotional intelligence, but
Maybe,
just
or how to
dressing
get
it
there
up
if you don't have it.
nicely and putting a bow on it. But yeah.
Well, because people think that, oh, it's normal to be angry all the time or to be full of fear. Like they'll say, oh my gosh, don't do that. No, or I can't be seen wearing that or without makeup or whatever it is. Like there's so much fear, shame, guilt, insecurity, any means judging it or accusing anyone or saying like, your feelings are wrong. We all have these feelings. We all go through that. But if you didn't gain wisdom and understanding from it, then you just suffer for nothing. So you make the difficulties have a much higher purpose by using these methods. And you'll have a lot of, you'll have people out there who just go, that's just the way I am. This is me. It's a victim mentality. So we've talked about this before, but people who hold this view, they are completely identified with their troubles. So the meditation methods that you can learn from the FitMind app or from basically any tradition that has any kind of meditation, it trains your brain or your essence or your awareness, whatever you want to call it. It trains that thing to switch into observer mode. And when you switch into observer mode, you become what in some traditions they call non-identified. You are not identified with your troubles. You can see them from a separate perspective. And that distance between you and your troubles is what they refer to as spaciousness. And spaciousness gives you breathing room to make rational decisions, to not let those emotions get the better of you and to see the situation completely objectively without the warped perspective that I'm right, you're wrong. My
Mm-hmm.
view is the right way. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
listen to me. So it leads to freedom. And this is the thing, right? So people live from problem to problem. We go through life, and when we see our friends, what do? We complain. Oh my gosh, he said this, and then she said that, and they did this, and my boss did this, and my partner did this, and my child did this. And
Sometimes
we,
it's good to get it off your
oh
chest. No, I'm
yeah,
just kidding.
yeah, you no, you do, like when you talk it out.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you talk it out and you go away and then you keep
Mm-hmm.
ruminating on it
Mm-hmm.
and you play the scene in the scenario over and over again. So you're doing a kind of meditation, but it's the reverse kind. It's a bad kind where you're making yourself feel worse by yourself.
You're ruminating on it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's fine. It happens. These are old patterns you're going up against that you're trying to break.
Mm-hmm.
So never judge yourself for it or chastise yourself. But as soon as you notice it, snap out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this idea that problems exist only in the mind of the person.
I believe that.
Yeah.
That that is such a that's such a important concept to know and be aware of, especially if um you know there's this talk of like um being careful with what you place your power in. Like, so um when you have that, when you said that problems exist in our minds only, it kind of leads into this whole concept of like, well, why does one person have problems with authority and another person doesn't? And we can go back and look at the the environment, the culture that they grew up in, the experiences that they had, which shaped this way of thinking, which cultivated this embedded fear or resentment towards authority figures, right? And that might be different to someone else who may have led a very easy life and maybe from a culture that's not a minority that doesn't experience discrimination from authority figures. So therefore, so that's what I'm saying. Like it's all how you've internalized it, and so like if the problem exists in our mind, but we have and that explains why some people do and don't have problems with certain things, but that also gives us the ability, if we believe in that, to overcome that that issue, that problem. It kind of empowers us to be like, okay, well, if the problem lies within this right here, then I just need to work on this right here and shift my perspective. And that to me feels more empowering than if I didn't believe that the problem wasn't me and that it was over there with the authorities, and therefore my problem will continue to exist so long as they exist, right? Or so long as they change. And if that never happens, I'm still carrying the problem. So yeah, I wholeheartedly believe that problems exist in our minds, because it's ours that we're carrying, and it's no one else's problem to resolve except for ourselves. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That's very true. I remember before my dad passed away, the final phone call we had, he rang me up and my son, Kalen, he was in uh, the Air Scouts at the time. and he's not anymore because he didn't want to continue for whatever reason. But um, I had sent photos of him doing the dawn parade fully in his uniform with his little
Oh,
scarf.
I think I saw
And
pictures of that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad saw those photos and he rang me up to say, "Oh, I'm so proud of Kaylin.
Oh.
Oh, I did things like that when I was a boy, and I'm really happy that he's a scout."
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad said, "Where are those electrical tools and the soldering iron and the electrical meter that I bought for Kaylin?" And I said, "I don't know. We put them somewhere when I moved." And my dad started to get really worked up. He said, "Oh, those were precious, and I'm going to teach him all these things. You can't lose them." And he was getting so worked up and almost a little bit upset that I didn't know where they were. And then I think it was actually 2 days later that he passed away. And we ended up passing those tools on to someone else. But the thing is that it was a big problem in his mind. And afterwards, no one was continuing to talk about that problem. No one was saying, like, where are the tools? Where are the tools? So it shows that when a person is there, the problem is there because they're thinking about it. When a person is not there, the problem is also not there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I love and miss my dad, um, but I feel safe and okay to use that example because
Mm-hmm.
it could be any example. He was just a person that came to mind who he's no longer physically with us, but we believe in reincarnation. So um, he's going to be amongst us again, if you're inclined to see things that way. But when we are able to move into observer mode, that is what allows us to notice these problems in our mind and hopefully change them. So it becomes like a superpower. So everyone who is just following their normal patterns, you could say they're almost like a mechanical puppet. I'll give an example. So let's say there's someone at work and they're going about their business, doing their work, and then they have someone come along in the office who is scheming against them. And unfortunately, you and I know from many, many years in the corporate scene that some departments, there might be people who don't have your best interests at heart. Um, other places you get on just fine. It just depends on the dynamics. So in this example, let's say someone comes along and they maybe they're envious of you and they're working against you. So they're setting out to manipulate you. And what do? They come up to you and they start flattering you. And if you are mechanical, you're not in observer mode, you respond like a puppet in their hand. You become blinded by their flattery and you trust them, and you might fall into whatever kind of scheme that they are intending for you. So being aware and observant becomes the superpower that allows us to break free of mechanical behavior. So another example would be, let's say you're in traffic or in the supermarket and someone cuts in front of you. Now, maybe they're even really rude as well when they cut in front of you. So if you are behaving mechanically and you become identified with the first reactionary emotion that arises, then what happens is this one random stranger can completely ruin your day. And by allowing them to do that, you give them so much power. You give away all of your power, and you can lose a whole day of peace by replaying the scene again and again in your mind. Oh, they said this to me, or da 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 da, or maybe they were racist, or they were a bigot, or something really awful and uncalled for. But nonetheless, they did these things, and then you gave them even more power by letting them do it again to you 1,000 times in your mind. And then you tell all your friends about what happened. So you allowed them to hurt you repeatedly in your own mind by reliving it. And I think it's fair to say that none of us actually wants to be that way. We think we don't have a choice. But the good news is we do when we start to practice self observation and even a daily reflection, thinking back on the day. All of the Stoics did this, like Marcus Aurelius, thinking back on everything that happened and seeing what we can learn from it. When we do this, it's it gives us a higher perspective. It gives us wisdom from all of our circumstances. And this superpower is like the difference between being a blind rat in a maze following a cheese trail, or being the Queen of England in the height of the British Empire and having all of this resource and capability at her disposal. So I think it's something that people should really consider and reflect on, and take this opportunity to pick up these tools and some new skills. It's a new skill set, but it can bring a complete transformation to your life and way of being.
Thank you, Ruth. I love that. I think like so, and I just thought, we are running out of time, so rather than just adding to that, I'm just going to summarize the things that we talked about and just like wrap it up here. So I've really enjoyed this segment that we've done, just talking about the astrological transits of or the astrological weather for the next coming few weeks, and how we're talking about, well, I mentioned about the mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter, and deconstructing and analyzing to come to another perspective, the idea of opposition, that we might find ourselves in polarizing situations. Two truths can exist at the same time, and can we hold the tension between two opposing ideas? Um, and so that was that. And then I really like that you brought up the that Fit Mind app, and but the more so the benefits of meditation, because I know like I've been doing it, and when I do it, I feel so good, but I can't explain why, other than to say that I have a clearer mind. And so, some of the benefits that you mentioned, I was just like, wow, yeah, I didn't even know that, but I really appreciate that you raised that. Um, we talked a little bit about the essence of the soul, and how it's an essential part of us. It holds all that is good and pure, and all those virtuous qualities, but can be obscured by our past conditioning, and but they can be recovered through ongoing self-observation. And that our natural state is full of love and beauty and happiness, and that really like resonated with me. Talked a little bit about herd mentality, breaking away from that, going against the norm, being that rebel, and doing doing uh doing something that is maybe against the status quo, um, and to not be basic, I think you said. Which is kind of funny. Yeah, don't be basic. Um, yeah, and then the short stories you shared, the examples, and that was really touching about your father. That just how you had that conversation so shortly, um, following, yeah, leading up to his
Yeah.
passing. So yeah, but I think there's been a lot of good things in here that we've discussed, and I just if you have any questions, if you're listening and want to reach out to us, please do so. We love the feedback. So thank you for listening, and remember, the path to your best reality is in your hands to create when you become conscious.